Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Big surprise yesterday. Stuart Immonen, Kathryn Immonen announcing that they're going to leave comics, at least for a while. Some people are calling it a retirement, but Stuart was quick to say that, no, if the right project comes along, he'll come back. But, hey man, what a great body of work, and what an opportunity to look back at the career of Stuart Immonen within some interviews that he's done over the years here at Word Balloon. We're going to start things off with a great episode that happened back on February 9th of 2011. That was my first opportunity to really go one-on-one with Stuart. We did do a spotlight panel of him and Kathryn at San Diego Comic-Con, and that was a couple years earlier. But on this episode, we were talking in the midst of Fear Itself, written by Matt Fraction, one of the big Marvel events. Beautiful artwork, of course, from Stuart. But we also talk about his amazing work with Brian Bendis on things like Ultimate Spider-Man. Nextwave, we touch on that with him and Warren Ellis. We look back at Shock Rockets and Superstar from he and Kurt Busiek. Even going back to his early DC work on the Legion of Superheroes. His Superman run as a writer and an artist. And, of course, his big DC event, The Final Night, with Carl Kiesel. So, really great stuff on this first segment of Word Balloon. Then we're going to jump to a 2011 conversation that I had with him live at Challengers Comics. Kind of weird. I also released a Kathryn Immonen episode today, and have a live one-on-one from Challengers. But Stuart came in, he did a gallery showing of a lot of his pages from Fear Itself, and we talk about that and a few other things, a little bit of process as well, briefly with Stuart. And then I want to wrap things up with that great Comic-Con spotlight panel on Kathryn and Stuart. That was featured on the Kathryn episode as well. But just in case, because I know sometimes, people will listen to one interview and not everyone, it was a shared spotlight. And again, I think he provides great insight on Stuart's early years during the black and white years. And, of course, his collaborations with Kathryn as well. But great conversations with Stuart Immonen, celebrating his career. It's a tribute. It's not, he hasn't died. It's okay. He's stepping away from comics. I hope it's a short hiatus, and he gets back to doing some wonderful comic book work. What a versatile creator. I look back at things like his wonderful work on moving pictures. He and Kathryn collaborating. Such a great, simple style compared to what he's done in his superhero work, but all equally amazing. So a great look at Stuart Immonen's career through the lens of Word Balloon today. It's brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you very much, League, for your continued support. I really appreciate it. Man, I've had some crazy technical difficulties. I don't know why. Mercury must be in retrograde, but it's been a little nutty time, and thanks to the support of the League of Word Balloon listeners, I've been able to take care of things. But thank you. If you'd like to subscribe to Word Balloon, you can do it via Patreon at wordballoon.com. Do you think the coverage I give you here at Word Balloon is worth the price of, say, a comic book each month? If you do think so and you want to help the cause out, you can go to wordballoon.com, click on the Patreon ad, or go to patreon.com/wordballoon. But thank you very much for your continued support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com. Do I need to say that there is a ton of Stuart Immonen product waiting for you at InStock Trades? It's true. You could start with Moving Pictures, as I said, that incredible run, or I should say graphic novel, that he and Kathryn did for IDW. A great World War II story. The Nazis pillaging much of Europe's great art collections. A little spy thing going on with museum curator Illa Gardner and SS officer Ralph Hauptmann. Pretty neat stuff. It's 30% off, just $10.46. But check it out for yourself. Great books at great prices. InStockTrades.com. All right, let's get into our first conversation with Stuart. Really, this is the second conversation because that spotlight was the first time that we talked on the record. But had great encounters with him at conventions. He and Kathryn, really one of the sweetest couples I've met in comics. Quiet people, and I never wanted to bother them. So our conversations were few, and I'm so sorry that it's been so long since I've had the chance to talk to Stuart or Kathryn. But I always wish them well. But it's a great chance for us to take a look at the great career of Stuart Immonen, through these conversations I've had with him. Let's go back to when he was just getting started with Fear Itself with Matt Fraction. Stuart Immonen on today's Word Balloon. First, I want to say congratulations on the Schuster nomination.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very much appreciated. Well, not to beat my own drum, but I did win last year, and that was a surprise too. So
excellent. Now, did you win for?
It's an honor to be nominated again.
Was it the same category, Best Artist, or was it for you and Kathryn?
Yeah. No, Moving Pictures, I don't think came up with the nominations, but that's cool. But she was nominated in the writer category, and I was nominated for artist.
I saw that. Yes, congratulations to both of you. And as usual, tough competition. You know, you got Francis, you got Cameron Stewart, you got Darwin.
Oh, I know. Don't remind me.
Among others.
You think, we're a small country in population, but there's a lot of talent here.
I'm aware. And I'm very bummed because, once again, they've scheduled a Wizard show opposite Chicago's C2E2, and I wasn't sure if you guys would necessarily come anyway, but it doesn't make it any easier when you have a show in your backyard in Toronto.
Yes, I know. We weren't invited to the Chicago show, and frankly, it's usually a matter of finances and time. There are only so many weekends you can set aside for doing this kind of thing, and obviously, it is, as you say, it's much easier to do it when it's close by. But so far we don't have very many shows lined up in the coming con season, which is like all the time now. 12 months
really.
of the year is con season.
Pretty much.
But we'd love to do that. We heard great things about last year's show.
Well, and it'd be great to see you guys, and I was thrilled to see you last summer in San Diego, and also yes. I should say this at the front for people who haven't heard it, go back and listen to the panel that we did, because if you don't hear me talk about certain things with Stuart, it's likely that we did talk about them 6 months ago with he and Kathryn, and and it was great. Then you got the
yes.
Inkpot Award. So
that's right. Again, what a surprise! I don't necessarily want to be reminded that I've actually been doing this job for more than 20 years. But
yeah, those lifetime achievement awards. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, they want to get it in before your wrist falls off.
Yeah, doddering. Exactly. No, this is good. No, man. It's ongoing, and I think that's great.
You're still able to lift it.
There you go. Yeah, because it is big. How did you guys get it through customs?
And heavy. Well, it wasn't like the Ignatz Award, the brick. But
that's right.
But you see, luckily there were two of us, so we were able to distribute. We didn't have to saw it in half or anything. But
very nice.
We were able to, put souvenirs in one and put the Inkpot in the other.
Okay. Well, let's talk about, first I want to talk about you leaving New Avengers, because it was a great run, and I loved the story that it ended on, and wow, we saw the rise and fall of Dr. Voodoo as Sorcerer Supreme in your hands.
Yeah, well, I was present, but really, Brian was running the show, and that was his vision. I was sort of kept in the dark for as much as anybody else for the great majority of the storytelling. But
really,
that was things are discussed among writer and editor primarily, and Brian's very generous and often offers to bring me into the storytelling process. But I've got so much on my plate already, and I know he can handle it, so he doesn't need my interference. I didn't know what the final conclusion would be, so it's not like I'm turning the pages as I'm doing it, and then I've got to draw this epic scene, and I had no idea. But I really didn't know until that sixth issue.
Wow. So how does that work then, Stuart? Maybe even with Brian in particular. Do you get an overview of the arc in general? What happens at the beginning of a story arc? How much information are you given?
Well, that kind of thing has happened in the past, and I think more. I was used to that when I was working at DC, especially on the Superman books.
Yes.
And at one time I was writing one of them as well as drawing.
Absolutely.
So this is all, of course, pre-internet. So we would all be physically sent everything that everybody was working on. So we would everybody on the team, which was some 20 people, would receive a couriered package with all the pencils that everybody had done that week, and all the script, and all the dialogue, and lettering, and everything.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a monster. It was like a phone book delivered to your door once a week.
So was it photocopies of everybody else's script and pencils and stuff?
Photocopies. And
interesting.
I'm still using the backs of those photocopies to for scrap paper in my printer right now.
Oh wow, man!
There was that much. It was like 20. Well, that was 15 years ago.
Man, that could be a little
That gives you an idea.
That could be a little side section of your table, man. You could sell some cool stuff right there.
I know.
Come on, man.
If ever I've got anything that's not sitting flush on the floor, then I can just prop it up with old photocopies from the Superman days.
Wow.
So I don't know. Maybe that whole process got beaten out of me at that point, because it was really a lot to keep track of.
Was it almost?
Since then,
was it almost overwhelming in terms of information? Then was it more than what you really needed to accomplish?
No, not necessarily more. And in fact, nowadays I want to have access to a certain character's current costume or what have you.
Sure.
And if usually I go to Google, and if I can't find what I'm looking for there, then I'll get in touch with the editor, and they've got some poor intern whose job is solely to come up with scans of stuff for people like me. But for the most part, it's not these days. It's not that much required. At least, not on in my experience, and not even on a book with a big cast like New Avengers.
Okay. So again, that was interesting, because we're going to come back to Superman, because that isn't something that we talked much about at that panel in San Diego. But
True.
But for Avengers and stuff, the basics of the story. I mean, how much are you given when the arc is about to begin from Brian? Let's start with Brian.
Right. Like I said, in the old days, there was a lot, and maybe just because I was doing some of the writing at that point, then I was more aware of that kind of process where you give an overview, and you give a book by book breakdown, and then you break it into scenes, and then you break it into pages, and so on, and that really isn't the case with my working situation right now, and it isn't the case with Brian. Even when we were working on Ultimate Spider-Man, it didn't come up. I would know that the arc would be 5 or 6 issues, or I would assume as much, since most of them were. But
sure.
I really wouldn't have any foreknowledge as far as where the crest of the story would be, and all the characters that would show up. I really just get it script by script, and that's sort of been the normal way of things, at least in my experience, since I've been at Marvel.
Huh. Now, on a book on a book like Avengers, where there are so many characters, revolving characters, cameos from people like Damian Hellstrom and Doctor Strange and various non-regular Avengers.
They just show up.
Okay. And is that okay? Is that a scramble? Like, holy shit! All right, what does he look like now? I mean.
No. I mean, deadlines being what they are, I'm pretty, if I may say, pretty reliable.
Yes, indeed. No, truly.
I don't seem to have too much trouble. Thanks. Getting a book out on a monthly basis, but even so, there's still. It doesn't take more than 24, maybe 48 hours to get the kind of reference I need, and it's not like, it must be more difficult for the writer. to get a real sense of, personality and, really get into the characters, and get, some understanding of who they are in order to be able to write them. But I just kind of have to know, what they look like.
Sure.
And it's pretty straightforward. But, and the powers and all that. But it's fairly uncomplicated.
Okay. And was it fun? Was it fun doing the Avengers? I know you're used to doing big team books. You've done, going back to the Legion even. So, for you handling a bunch of characters, that's nothing new. But was it, was it fun? Was it okay?
Well, yeah, it was fun. It was definitely a shift from Spider-Man, and
right.
And Brian warned me ahead of time, and he said, there are a lot of people in the book, and I thought, well, you've got Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy and and Flash and everybody else on Spider-Man, and I thought, well, how many more characters could there be? But it is different because the characters are more at the forefront, and somebody's favorite character might be the Thing or Iron Fist or whoever, and even if they're just in the background, the way Brian writes, he gives everybody a little bit of dialogue. So you've really got to pay attention and do your best on all the characters, and nobody is really in the background, as much as the secondary or tertiary characters are in a book like Ultimate Spider-Man.
Sure, everybody gets their big moment, and not only from a story standpoint, but clearly, you're carrying half the load, and really, in a lot of cases, a big money shot, for a lack of a better word. That's in your hands. And again, I think too, from Iron Fist's costume changing, when he went to the magic dimension, even the appearances of the villains and stuff. Those are big moments and stuff like that. So, there's always something happening in an adventure book. Yeah, as opposed to
You're reminding me of all these challenges that I've already thought I had put behind me. But
well, and I imagine that we're getting to Fear itself, and I'm sure that will have its own set of challenges as well. But yeah, as opposed to Principal Suntress talking to Aunt May in Ultimate Spider-Man.
It's more of the same, actually, if not even more so. Matt's a fabulous scripter, and it's really great to work with him finally. But the scale of things, the scope of the story is such that I've got all the characters basically, without giving anything away, that I had on New Avengers, plus maybe that many again to deal with. So again, it doesn't matter how small these characters are. I'm looking at a double-page spread right now in the office, and I'm drawing hundreds, maybe thousands of of tiny characters, and really I've got to make them all count because it's important.
Absolutely. How did this assignment come up for Fear itself? Who called you, and how was the team put together?
Well, it actually happened for me at San Diego last year, and I guess Kathryn and I had been doing a signing with Brian at the Marvel booth, and he pulled me aside, out of earshot, and he said, Matt Fraction really wants to talk to you. He's got this, this news, and he's got this thing that he wants to discuss, and he was very serious about it, and I said, well, what is it? And he said, oh, well, I can't tell you. And then I think a day or two went by, and we finally met up with Matt, and it was at a restaurant or a bar or somewhere in the Gaslamp district, and then all just chatting away, and it was normal, and I say, so what is this thing? And he said, well, I can't really talk about it here. And he pulled me outside, and we're in this dark alley, and he says, well, I've got this really great idea, and I really want to talk to you about it, but I was talking to the editor, and we can't discuss it. So I couldn't find out about it then either. And it wasn't until I got home, and I think maybe 4 or 5 days went by, when Tom Brevoort, who's my editor on New Avengers, of course, and editor on Fear itself, calls me up and says, well, I've got this thing that I want to talk to you about. And I said, is this the thing that I was almost told about already twice? And he said, I'm not sure. But he did lay it out. And I said, well, I've got tremendous anticipation because, everybody's talking about this thing like it's, this amazing secret that they can't even let me in on. And Tom says, well, maybe it's not such a big deal, and let me lay it all out for you. So he described the story in very broad terms over, 10 or 15 minutes, and outlaid not only, some of the basic mechanics of the story, but also the kind of promotional and marketing push that Marvel was committed to putting behind it, and also said that we'd be able to have Wade Bongrabadger and Laura Martin on board as well.
Wow!
So superstar team, and then said, well, I said, that sounds like a pretty big deal to me. So of course I said yes, but I don't know why he was trying to soft pedal the whole thing. Maybe he was just having me on, but yeah, I to be honest, John, I have no idea why I was selected for this job.
Well, now I understand.
Oh well,
hey, Stuart, you're a fan. Honestly, you're a fan favorite. It doesn't surprise me that it's your turn to do an event here. You've done big events before. You did Final Night back in the day at DC.
That's right.
So, I mean, you're no stranger to big events. Nextwave was kind of its own happening as it was going on. And you've had
I think that's an excellent sort of Roger Corman description of that particular book.
Really, the thing gained momentum, and it kind of became this thing that I don't think anybody expected. But as you say too, and I think this is something that a lot of fans will be excited about, is you're a top quality artist, but also a top quality artist that manages to make deadlines. So I think, I think those two things.
I'm not sure why that in particular is monumental, but it seems to be uncommon anyway.
Yeah, well, now you mentioned all the promotional art that was involved, and we've seen some evidence of that in ads and different images that have popped up on the internet. How much of that, how early did you start working on this?
Well, maybe not as early as I could have, and Matt let me in on some of the details surrounding the involvement of the whole editorial staff and him. I mean, the way he made it sound, it was him on one side of a long meeting table, and then everybody else at Marvel on the other side. So again, you mentioned Final Night, and so I'm aware of the amount of coordination that needs to take place in order to make this kind of thing happen. And in one sense, it is just the 7 issues that we're doing, and you can read that and be satisfied. But if you want more, then there's going to be more, and books that will be written to stand alone along with our the main title will be available, and then there will be obviously every character that's in Fear itself is a well-known Marvel character, and they're in their own books, and they're doing something that has to do with it. So there's every editor that handles one of these characters has a say, and they don't want control to slip entirely out of their hands.
Sure.
When they're dealing with these characters on a monthly basis. So there was a lot of steps that had to be taken between when I found out about it around July and then when we actually got rolling, which I guess was around late October. So then, as you mentioned, there were promotional art, teaser art, and teaser covers that were done by me and other people, and that stuff is still happening. There was a thing about the one of the prologue stories that I think was just released today, which doesn't have to do with Matt and myself, but it's handled by I think Ed Brubaker, if I'm not mistaken. I could look it up. But these things are going to keep rolling out until the book happens in April.
Gotcha.
But for my part, I've just got to put blinkers on and concentrate on the story in front of me, and then deal with covers and posters and teaser work and so on as it comes up. But I trust in the scheduling at Marvel to guide me through all that, and I've gotten a detailed deadline schedule for all the issues, and it's perfectly reasonable. It's no more difficult than doing a monthly book under any other circumstances, except that it involves all these characters and involves this cosmic scale story. So I think everybody is putting a little extra effort into the work that they're doing, from Matt on down.
Did you have to, for the teaser art that you did, then coordinate with...
Are we talking about the Odin and Thor piece?
You tell me, because
the group shot.
Okay.
Oh, you don't know?
Well, that's the thing. No, I've seen the Odin shot, and I've seen the group shot, and I was wondering how many of those did you end up doing?
Well,
and they might still be coming out, so I don't want to, yeah, and I can imagine that sometimes it's hard to remember what's already been released and what hasn't. So, the Spider-Man piece, maybe, or the Hulk piece that we've seen.
No, those were handled by other people.
Okay,
and I'm trusting in the coordination magic that happens behind the scenes in the bullpen that will make all this stuff happen. They don't. I think I've been working with Marvel since 2004 or 2005.
That would have been my guess. Okay,
on contract, yeah, and therefore established a fairly regular track record, and I think
sure.
It's known what I can handle and what I can't handle. So, when I started on Ultimate Spider-Man, they were doing 18 issues a year.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, but I can't do that. And I said up front, if this is what you're expecting, it's not going to happen. And there was some tisking and some disappointment, I think, but they said, "Well, okay, I guess."
Jesus.
I can do what I can do.
Yeah, but how many Bagleys are there out there? I mean, I can only think of like possibly Ramita, maybe Junior, if he,
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, Mike Norton is a guy that I think if he were asked can crank out more than 12 issues a month or a year rather. Yeah. But honestly, I can only count him on one, maybe two hands. That's about it.
Yes. Well, the thing with me is that I might be able to do it, but it just wouldn't be the quality that you get with Mark or with JR. Yeah. So
crazy.
They can do it. I don't know how they do it, but there you go.
Unbelievable. Well, that's okay, man. And again, we want it good. I mean, that's the thing. And that's why even at the end of the day, when it's collected, I don't blame the Hitches and the Eptings and the, Van Skyvers that have, troubles with, maintaining a monthly schedule. If the end result is great stuff, that's what matters. And it's going to look good on the bookshelf. But I mean, everyone does kind of get bummed when, there's a 7-issue series and it takes, 12 months for the 7-issue series to come out. But I don't,
Yeah, sure.
But that's okay. Well,
and not only the fans, of course.
Can't imagine on your guys' end.
Always be aware of that, but the company wouldn't. They've got an annual budget that they've got to adhere to, and I bet a lot of people don't realize, but come the 1st of December, they really start being quite firm on the deadlines, because they do have to have things in on schedule and accounted for, and it's all, financial cosmic gobbledygook.
I understand.
I don't know what the crazy formulas are, but they really do pay attention to this stuff. So it's not just a creative matter, but it's a business matter too.
Sure, because things are obviously budgeted for a specific year. And if it does spill into the next year, then that's obviously a big problem. So I can appreciate that. Yeah. No, very good. Well, I'm glad you said that, man. That's a very good point that I don't think the average reader does take into account.
Okay, that's an exclusive.
No, good. Well, are there characters in Fear itself that you're beyond the new characters? Are there old heroes that you've never had to draw before? Old established.
Well, actually, I was doing an email interview earlier in the week, and it was pointed out to me. I didn't realize it, but apart from in that group shot, the teaser image, apart from Black Panther and Dracula, I've drawn everybody else.
Interesting.
Either solo or in a team book already, usually for several issues at a time.
Sure.
So, Dracula and Black Panther are two, for example, that I haven't had the opportunity to draw, I don't think, ever. And of course, it's not the classic Gene Colan Dracula, but I think the new design actually has a lot going for it. So I'm kind of keen on making that happen.
Very cool.
Yes, having spoken to Matt, you also know that there's a lot of stuff that centers around Asgardians with the book, so I get to draw a lot of those characters that I haven't done, since early days at Marvel for me. Again, going back, 5 or 6 years, when I was drawing Thor.
Who was writing Thor back then? Was that Dan Jurgens?
Yeah, that was Dan.
Okay, Dan. Very cool.
I was following again on the heels of JR, and he's fantastic, and he knows how to draw power and godly presence, and I felt a little intimidated, but I did my best.
Yeah, but honestly, Stuart, no, all people have to do is look at your bibliography, and you've done all these things. You've done big space opera. You've done, I think you've hit all these, and certainly in the DC world as well. So that's why it's, you're more than up to the task, man. I mean, really, the stuff that's come out so far has been great. Everything that you've been doing on Avengers has been wonderful. And I was excited to hear that you and Matt were working together on this thing. So I think it's gonna be fun.
Certainly no more than I was. I'm very, very happy about it. The thing about me having done these other books is that I don't think a lot of people realize it, and I think that there is, there's a turnover in terms of readership. So,
absolutely.
And there are people that, just follow characters, so they'll just read the Hulk, and that's the book that they concentrate on. So artists come and go, and then they don't know what happens to those creators. But the other aspect with my work, in particular, is that I'll change styles.
Yes.
Sometimes a little bit, and sometimes a lot, and I think that prevents people from being able to follow along in a linear way when I go from book to book. So the work that I did on Thor, for instance, doesn't really have Thor, the regular series, doesn't really have anything to do with how I'm handling the character this time around. I mean, if anybody has any doubts, then the work that I'm doing on Fear itself is more or less in line with what's been coming out in New Avengers.
Mm-hmm. No, and I not only have you shifted your style and maybe to challenge yourself. Tell me what is the impetus to change your style after a certain amount of time? Is that just a organic thing that happens, or are you like, I'm tired of doing it this way, let me try something else?
There's a certain amount of creative frustration that happens that like a tickle in the back of my brain that makes me want to try out something, but it can't just happen on the spur of the moment. It's got to match the project. So, if I'm committed to drawing one way, and I'll make that decision based strictly on story. So if the content, demands a certain look, I'll try and achieve that look as best I can. But I won't switch gears in the middle of that series.
Sure.
I'll wait until the next thing comes along when, maybe it's more cartoon action like Nextwave. It's over the top. It's parody, satire. And then, I'll try to make it more serious and more superhero-y for something like New Avengers.
I saw.
So, yeah.
You go ahead, and then I'll tell you what I saw recently. Go ahead.
No. I'm done.
All right, then I'll tell you.
I'm talking too much.
Not at all. No, this is really interesting, and I'm glad we're getting into this because preparing for this, I was looking online, and there's a lot of stuff that you did back in the 90s that I didn't realize it was you. One of those things was Final Night. I came to Final Night because that was kind of in my down period of comics where I really wasn't reading. And so I missed it the first time around. I did end up reading it in trade, but I didn't realize it was you right away. But even better, there was you did something for one of the secret files for Superman. And you did those series of villains' origins, and I happen to see that I want to say Comic Alliance just reprinted those a couple months ago.
Is that? Yes, that's right. There was a link.
Yeah, and my God, they were great. It was really in this Winsor McCay style, and you did these 2-page origins for all the different Superman villains. There's a great Doomsday that was on there. There's a great Luthor thing, and it was wonderful to see. And I mean, it was great, man. I mean, it really was.
Yeah,
it was very Little Nemo-like.
I don't think anybody saw that. I think it maybe sold 10,000 copies, and that was in the speculation days. So I would bet that half of those were pulped at some point.
Or they're sitting in dollar bins right now, and I'm telling everybody, run out there and grab these things. Because they're great. Oh, they're beautiful, man. They really were. They were fun, inventive things. So what was the inspiration for playing like in Winsor McCay's world for that?
Well, this was a story that I wrote as well. And there was sort of like this bracketing story where Luthor is telling, reading from a children's book to his daughter. Or it's as if he's reading from a children's book, but in fact he's telling his own origin and how he sort of ruled Metropolis before Superman showed up.
Yeah, before the big bad Superman came and screwed everything up, basically.
Yes, in the Man of Steel, the John Byrne stories.
Okay.
So there's this story that surrounds these individual origins, and it's his very brief take on what happened with these other villains, and he's sort of present. He's either in the background with all these other stories, or he has some influence on the way things turn out. The idea of a children's book really appealed to me, and I was talking with Joey Cavalieri, who was the Superman editor at the time, and he was, Joey's a cartoonist himself, and really is interested in experimentation and pushing the medium, and doing all kinds of things, and not just doing it straight. I propose, and I'm really digging back far, but I'm guessing that I propose doing this in this certain way, and showing the expected, the normal style on this bracketing story, and then doing something a little different there, and he was all over it. So really it just takes a little faith on the part of the editorial team to see that it can be something more. It's visual. You want to be able to explore things in a different way. And in some cases they would have a different artist do one sequence, and then another artist do the other sequence, but I wanted to handle it all. So I was given free rein. I was given enough rope, as they say. And I think I pulled it off, but it was just in this sort of, one-shot book that came out alongside the regular series, and I don't think a lot of people saw it at the time, so it's actually, kind of amazing that it can surface again so many years later, but I'm pleased.
Well, absolutely,
man. It's the same kind of thing. Sorry.
No, go ahead. It's the same kind of thing in terms of?
It's the same kind of thing as being approached with a script by somebody else and having the themes and the mood and the context of the story dictate the look of it, right? And if I'm capable, or if I feel capable, then I'll try and do my best to make that vision, that writer's vision, whether it's mine or somebody else's, come alive in the way that the story seems to demand.
Very cool. Now, I want to jump before I continue with Superman. I want to jump back to your Legion of Superheroes stuff, because you were part of the 5 years later story arc, and were you at the tail end of that and really into the transition of 0 Hour to Legionnaires? Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, that 5 years later is probably my favorite run of the Legion, and I just felt
really. I'm not sure that you're in the majority here.
I understand, but I guess it was that really interesting kind of. Well, I know that the Legion always represented this kind of positive world, and that's what I think made the 5 years later arc such an interesting arc. And it was sad, but it was also really it was incredibly compelling, and where all these heroes ended up. And, some of them really in tragic situations. It was really amazing. And I give it up to Giffen every time I see him. I didn't realize that you were one of the artists on there. So now I'll praise you as well and say that was, like I said, one of my favorite runs. I hope that DC has the foresight to collect the whole story sometime, because it was great. It was great. So, and you were on for a long time.
Well, I think 4 years total, and that was, my breakout book at DC. I'd done, I think, just 2 jobs total before that. And, here I am sandwiched between Jason Pearson, who's amazing, and Chris Sprouse, who's amazing.
You bet.
So, here I have, almost no professional experience, at least at the Marvel and DC level. So I'd done a one shot, and I'd done a short story for a showcase book that had come out at that time, and I think that was it.
Okay.
And to be honest, and this was no secret at the time, but I didn't follow Legion, and I think there were a lot of people. I wasn't really aware of the kind of fan base that it had, but I learned.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And there were certainly people who thought that, someone who doesn't, live, breathe, eat, sleep Legion of Superheroes should not be on the book. So I felt this extra, pressure to perform. But it's really nice to hear that you thought that stuff was good. It was definitely unconventional, and, it was really in a transition phase where, Keith's work had been so strong, and again, he's another kind of artistic chameleon where it looks like one thing, and you have an expectation that the next issue, as drawn by Keith Giffen, will look like what you've seen before.
Sure,
but he won't necessarily provide that.
Right. No, but that
was a real inspiration, knowing that someone like that can do that kind of thing, and that the companies are there to support it within reason, and that was really inspiring for me to realize that that kind of experimentation within genres is still welcome and supported.
Well, as I say, it was a great run, man, and I really did enjoy it, and as much as I'm sure a lot of people were relieved to get the bright, sunny Legion that they got post 0 Hour, I was kind of like, I was enjoying the tragedy.
Yeah.
So, and I was a long time religion reader too. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's, I don't know. Maybe I was ready for something different at that stage of my readership, and that's why it appealed to me as much as it did.
Yes, that could be. And I'm forgetting Olivia Coipel, who did Legionnaires after Chris.
Right.
And
the Moyes, of course.
Yes, for sure. So it was all, there was a lot of great stuff happening at that time.
Oh yeah, man. Absolutely. Well, and then, back to Superman, I didn't realize that a couple of your issues, you plotted them, and then Mark Miller ended up dialoguing them.
Yeah, some kid named Mark Miller that I brought along.
Well, is that, where, around, was this, at Mark's start when, he was kind of co-writing with Grant, and how did that work out that you plotted this story, but Mark ended up scripting it?
Well, from my perspective, it was a timing issue.
Okay.
At one point, I was, and this would have been really close to 1999 or 2000, I was writing and drawing adventures, but I had also had this idea for what I proposed as an annual, starring the Contessa, who was the wife of Lex Luthor, at least at that time. And but DC was keen on doing some original hardcovers, not big-page hardcovers, and it was thought that the idea would be suitable for one of these instead. So, and actually that and there was a Superman story that Howard Chaykin wrote that came out around the same time, where those were the first two original Superman hardcover books that DC had ever done. So again, I'm feeling this pressure.
Was that Son of Superman? Was that his Son of Superman?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay. And yours was End of the Century, correct?
Yes. So I was writing and drawing adventures, or perhaps action at that point, because we kind of shifted around a little bit. And then I had this 96-page hardcover, which, being called End of the Century, had to come out before year 2000.
Sure.
So there was a lot of pressure to get that done, and I was writing and drawing and doing painted sequences in that book. This was when I was younger and didn't know my limitations, so I was doing way more than I really should have been permitted to do. So I got I took sort of a leave of absence off the scripting duties on the regular Superman series, and Mark was asked to come in at that point and help me out on that. But as far as the context of what else he was doing at that point, I'm not sure precisely, but I think it was fairly early days for him.
Okay.
And certainly it was, well before, Mark Miller,
the Mark Miller.
Yes, the capital, all caps. So the personality.
Yes.
But he made it work, and then I, kept slogging along. So one of us figured it out.
That's cool. Well, and I'm curious too, because I'm always interested in the writers that you've worked with before, and I know you've worked with Warren before, obviously on Nextwave and Ultimate Fantastic Four.
Yep.
But Carl Kessel in the DC years. Now you guys did Adventures of Superman, but you also did Final Night.
Yeah, and we did a couple of Fantastic Four stories, which were really great too. I don't know if I
remember
that. Familiar with that?
I am,
and you don't remember?
No, I do, and was that right after Mark Waid, and right before. And I'm trying to think of who would be right before. But am I right? Was it in that kind of 2005-ish kind of area, or 2006?
Yes, Yeah, that's right. And
No, they were very good, man.
Carl had done this really touching story where Ben Grimm comes out as a practicing Jew, and so many people reacted so positively to that.
I remember that. That's right.
Yeah, it was really nice, and it was just so gratifying, and to be a part of that, and then to realize after the fact, it's one of those stories that was like sort of a really quiet story that didn't seem to have a whole lot of impact as far as what you expect in a superhero genre book.
Sure.
But it really touched a lot of people, and I still get people coming up to me and saying, that was just such a great story, and it was almost like a throwaway idea that it was meant to fill in between two larger stories, and yet these are the kinds of stories that people seem to latch onto. The last issue of New Avengers, sort of tag issue number 7, which wraps up the big, magic arc.
Yes.
But is more like, a quiet Avengers in the Mansion, at home, just talking issue, and people really seem to really get behind that, and I saw one reference to it being, sort of in line with, the X-Men playing baseball with their superpowers,
sure.
Behind the compound. So
yeah, but that's
great.
It's those human moments.
It's a bit challenging for me because I've got to draw, everybody sitting around a table for 14 pages and make it look interesting.
Well,
panel after panel after panel.
But much like moving pictures with you and Kathryn, it was kind of that same challenge of quiet moments becoming compelling. And no, I think you find the right style and the right way to kind of convey that and these quiet moments. The Thing stuff, I'm glad you brought that up because I remember it really not only, I think, touched regular Marvel readers, but also it managed to wake up the mainstream world. And I remember there was some big mainstream media coverage of, hey, guess what? Right. Guess who's Jewish? Ben Grimm. And I remember hearing Stan even comment on that on a National Public Radio show. So,
that's right.
It's...
That's right. You don't have to kill people to get on, mainstream media.
I'm reminded of
that's okay.
When Walter Simonson cut Wonder Woman's hair. It was that kind of same reaction of, hey, look at the change that's happening in one of our iconic 20th century mythology figures. So that's... No, I think that's neat. But as you say, no, it's reassuring that I think the readership reacts to the quiet moments in a positive way because, that is what elevates the medium beyond the Sunday Funnies fare that I think, it became for so many decades. And now with, the modern era has really kind of, you guys have all kind of come to the table and elevated the game and said, no, this can be good, serious storytelling fare. And that's the only way to prove that is quality art, quality stories. So,
sure.
That's awesome. I think that's terrific.
Oh, well, thanks. I think so too. I'd be awfully disappointed if I'd been, working at this for this long and I thought, oh, wait a minute, it's all been a waste. No, it's not like that. I think everybody, as much as there is a divide between the indie culture and the mainstream as we understand it in comic terms.
Sure.
Culture, everybody who's in it is in it to do the absolute best that they can. Maybe there are a few exceptions, but really, I think that the great majority of people are they really want to perform and entertain people and do great stuff. I think Scotty Young, for instance, was saying on Twitter that if I think it was Scotty. I'm gonna catch it if it wasn't. But somebody on Twitter was saying, if they weren't making stuff for a living in this way, they'd still be making stuff because they just love it that much. So that's the way I feel about it. And I think genre is not a mark of quality or not. I think you can tell, those kinds of powerful, moving, emotional stories that people want to read in a superhero book, or you can tell it in something like moving pictures. And I think that it's all about story, right?
Yep.
We're all there to lift it up and to make it as compelling and meaningful to people as possible. And it doesn't matter what the decoration of it, the way that it is presented. But here I'm rambling.
No, but I agree, and
I think I've made my point.
No, absolutely. Well, and another great story like that has a lot of bombast, but also good emotional moments. We talked a little bit about it at your panel in San Diego, but the Kurt Busiek story, Secret Identity, I think is the Superman Secret Identity story, and it's interesting that he's, I guess, coming back to that milieu with John Paul Leon. Yes. I guess they're in the midst of doing a Batman story.
Another fantastic artist. Yeah,
absolutely.
I know. And that, as I understand it, has sort of been percolating again since 2003 or so, or maybe even earlier, because I know that Kurt wanted to do something else, not necessarily with me, but I don't think he would have ruled that out, since I think we've got a pretty good working relationship. Maybe he would.
Yeah.
Maybe he thinks differently, but I don't think so. But he got hooked up with one thing, and I got hooked up with another, so it never materialized in that way. But obviously, at the time, DC was behind the Secret Identity and wanted to, I think, explore it as far as involving other characters, and yeah, a lot of people again are continue to be really moved by this story, in which not a whole lot of superheroic action takes place. I mean, it's there, and he does, he saves people, and there are huge floods and tornadoes,
sure,
and crashing trains and government plots and stuff like that, and so the trappings are there, but it's really subdued. And again, as far as my contribution went, when Kurt was talking about doing something that took place in a naturalistic setting, that essentially took place in the real world, I didn't want to do it in a way that was conventionally a superhero approach. I really wanted to sort of try and elevate my game and do something that felt natural and felt real to people. So, the whole thing has to knit together.
Did you use photographs to kind of inform your art? Because it almost did have that kind of realistic quality to it.
Yeah. Well, I do. I've always done that. And having... It just gets easier all the time. I mean, I actually used to use film cameras, and not only on Secret Identity, but on the painted work in End of the Century, particularly. I was referencing models, and in fact, Kathryn is one of the models in End of the Century.
Oh, that's cool.
So if you want to pick that in. She's there.
Huh.
But yeah.
That's cool.
But
that's really cool.
But it's in those days it was really laborious, and even if you had 24-hour turnaround on getting film developed, it was a really challenging way to work. But I've always kept sort of a morgue or a library of references, and I still do that kind of thing. So it's mostly digital now, but it's not just the very realistic work that is influenced by photographic reference, but even the cartoony stuff, Nextwave, for example, had loads of photo reference, and hopefully the skill of the artist is present enough that people don't sort of see that first.
Understood.
That it should look like that it's natural to the setting. So in the case of Nextwave, it's everything is cartoons. And everything is exaggerated, but it should make sense within that world.
Understood.
But even so, it should also make sense, to human eyes, to see that the characters aren't grossly disproportioned, or they should have natural body language, and they should move and react and act in a way that we expect them to. So I'm always using photographic reference to make sure that I'm sort of on model.
I got you. Now, this did come up, but for the purposes, if people didn't hear us 6 months ago, we're talking about a bit about Nextwave. And you had a very good answer to that question, I think, at the panel back in San Diego. I imagine things haven't.
I'm going to remember.
Well, no, but essentially, people were wondering, and especially after the collection came out. The new deluxe version of the collection came out. What are the chances that we might, if ever, see another Nextwave story?
Well, I'd say as we go forward in time, maybe not so hot, but as little as 6 months or a year ago, it actually seemed pretty positive that it was possible that there could be at least a one more story that we could tell,
like a one shot or an arc.
Well, they were still deciding on the format. Marvel was still deciding on the format of the collected edition, and they might have done one of the oversized hardcovers, and if that was the case, they were wondering if Warren and I might be able to come together and do something that would pad it out and make it a little more special for the people that already had the individual issues of the other collections or what have you. And as I understand it, Warren initially said no, and no. And then he was given, a couple of days to think about it, and then the quote that I got was, "God help me, I've got an idea." and he had something. I don't even remember if I found out what it was, but he did have something that he could, do in a pinch. And I know that he was really quite busy at the time, and of course I've had regular work since then too.
Sure.
So, but I think we were both prepared to drop what we had to and make a go of it. But as it turned out, the collection just did the 12 issues, and I think there were some extras, but they decided that ultimately they didn't have room for another story of any length. At least, for that. But, I'm trying to concentrate solely on Fear itself, and that looks like that's going to take up all my time until September or so.
Understood.
And I'm not even sure what I'll be capable of doing at that point myself, because I might not even be physically able to lift a pencil.
Well, I was going to, honestly, man, I was going to ask about that, because you really haven't had a break, per se.
Yeah.
I can't think of the last time you had a break. So do you need, do you need that? I mean, do you think, after something like this, you might need hey, give me a month or two to kind of chill out and crack my knuckles and,
actually, well, one thing that I was concerned about between the end of my run on New Avengers and the beginning of Fear itself was sort of being out of the public eye for a number of months. And it's not like the work hasn't been there. I've been working steadily, and just, dropped one project and picked up another one right away. But to sort of alleviate that, an opportunity came up for Kathryn and I to do a short story for the X-Men office, which I think is going to be out in just a week or two. It's in the final issue of the anthology X-Men to Serve and Protect, which I think has already had 3 issues, and we'll be doing a book out. We'll be doing a story in the 4th, and it's. But I think that the overarching theme for the series is the X-Men and non-X-Men Marvel characters meeting up. So, being that the creators are Kathryn and myself, we wanted to do a Patsy Walker story. So we're doing Hellcat and Gambit.
Oh, that's great.
But yes, it was fantastic. I was really pleased with the way it turned out. But part of the reason, apart from getting to work with Kathryn, that I wanted to do it was to have something, on the shelves between November and April, where I'm not. It doesn't look to the public like I'm doing anything at all. But even if I get 8 pages out in that length of time, it still feels like I've got my toes in the water.
No, I understand.
But like you say, behind the scenes, I'm doing stuff nonstop, and if I'm not at a convention or some other kind of appearance, then really it is very, very time consuming, and as it works out, even though there's time in most of the schedules to in a monthly schedule to do 22 pages and get weekends off,
okay.
I still feel like I kind of have to do something almost every day, and that might just be a couple of hours, but I really feel like I notice a drop in quality if I let it go for a couple of days, and certainly if I'm away traveling or whatever, I really find it difficult to get back into the mindset and the sort of mind muscle connection
Sure.
that is required to get your brain working and your hand working at the same time. So I don't like to take a whole lot of time off, but I get the feeling that after this particular project, I'm going to be fairly ready.
Understand.
And the last time I renewed my contract, I put in I requested a leave of absence clause, which would allow me to, maintain every other aspect of the contract, but just, take a while to recharge batteries, and everybody was okay with that.
Good.
As long as the other aspects are adhered to, which is basically not working for other comic book companies.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. A break is a break. And but that being said, the sort of soft plan, which isn't set in stone yet at all, but Kathryn and I have another idea for an independent graphic novel, and I think we showed some slides of work in progress.
I wanted to ask about that. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Russian Olive to Red King. We're talking about, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah. Which doesn't have a publisher. It doesn't have a page count. It's very sort of loose and fluid and organic right now. And frankly, I haven't been able to do too much more than what I've had available to show the crowd at San Diego.
Gotcha.
Understood. So
absolutely.
That's really been sitting quite far back in my mind, but it's something that we want to get to sooner rather than later. So if there's a break and there's some actual time off, then maybe I can use some of that time off from Marvel to wrap that thing up, and that's certainly something that as I said, is in the back of my mind. But I think, it's not something that I can do. It's not something I feel that I can do in off hours or on Sunday afternoons in the way that Moving Pictures was done. Moving Pictures came out online once a week, one page every week, and that's basically how it was produced as well. So I'd be working, on whatever project, probably Marvel,
right,
related, and on the weekends I'd be doing Moving Pictures, and it was an interesting experiment. And I'm glad we did it that way. But when it came to collect it in book form, we kind of touched on this earlier, but, I looked at all those pages together and all these pages that have been strung out over a 3-year period, and I saw, a difference in the way it was being drawn at the beginning as compared to the way it was being drawn at the end.
Yeah.
And I actually spent quite a lot of time going back over all the pages and trying to find a middle ground, and it's very simply drawn, but I think that's kind of that's not an indication of quality. It's kind of an illusion where it's actually quite challenging to draw in that very spare, pared down way. Especially when, as it was being produced, I was doing something completely different 6 other days of the week.
Right.
So I did find at the end that it wasn't, it didn't hang together in the way that I really wanted it to. So when we do sit down and do Russian Olive in its entirety, I think it has to be done in one, big chunk. And that'll probably be, it's right now hanging around 100, 120 pages, which is a similar length to Moving Pictures.
Right.
But I think that that can be done, over the course of a couple of months, if that was the only thing I was doing. And I think that would, really ensure that it would all make sense together. It would all be all knit into one cohesive thing. Well, unlike this sentence entirely, but, as far as comics go, it was
not at all.
I think it really requires that I sit down and concentrate on that solely.
Okay. No, I can see that, man, and that's fair. And again, yeah, I was wondering about that, and I was going to ask you about it, and clearly your work schedule suggests that you've just kind of laid out what will need to happen for you to get back to Russian Olive. So when you do, we look forward to it. Because, again, Moving Pictures is something we covered a lot in our panel at San Diego. So again, I refer people to that episode to listen to it and hear about the book. It's a wonderful book, and I know a lot of my friends have picked it up since that episode. And really, man, honestly, a few other podcasters really and really were like blown away, and weren't used to seeing that style from you, and just really fell more in love with Kathryn's writing. So I think win-win. So it worked out.
Yes, for sure. And we were really pleased by the sort of overall reception and the numbers we've gotten back from Top Shelf concerning its first year of publication. We were in Spain in November, and we worked with Dolman, the publisher in that country, to get a Spanish edition out for our appearance in Spain. And they must have worked around the clock, because they basically had a month to translate and reformat and print and distribute the book before we got there, and it happened miraculously. But the edition is so gorgeous that we were really, really, really impressed by the way it looked, and actually had a couple of moments where we thought, wow, we could have done some of this with with our edition, but we were really satisfied with what we accomplished with Top Shelf, and also there was an Italian edition that came out at the Lucca Festival.
Fantastic.
Earlier on in 2010. So we couldn't be happier at the reception that we've gotten.
I'm not surprised because obviously it is a very European story, and I can see it obviously working in the various countries, being translated and stuff. So that's terrific, man. That's fantastic. It's wonderful. It really is, and I think that's and again we love the superhero stuff. That's great. It's great that you're able to flex your muscles though and do this other stuff, both of you. And when you have time to do the next one, we're excited about it.
This is where we came from,
True, exactly.
The kind of material that we were doing in the late '80s,
the black and white era,
publishing, and yeah. So and this is where almost everybody that it seems that's working for Marvel now has come from. You think of Brubaker and Bendis and Fraction, for example, and all these guys have come from independent work.
That's exactly right.
Doing stuff that interested them, that they were really keen on doing, and they're obviously still doing. In some cases, walking the line between superheroics and independent work, but I think it doesn't have to be exclusive. You don't have to do one or the other.
Absolutely.
And it just goes to show.
Very cool, man. Well, another mainstream thing that came out in November that everyone I think was happy to see come back was Shock Rockets. And
yes,
that's kind of neat.
And IDW did such a beautiful job. That's a book that you just can't kill. we were the only ones to complete our commitment with Guerrilla, and that's in no small part due to Kurt's dedication to ownership and self-publishing, and also his dedication to readers and fans. We were really committed to doing what we set out to do, even though the kind of House of Cards situation that Guerrilla found itself in just didn't lend itself to having it happen very easily. But then, there was some media rights that were optioned and eventually sold for Shock Rockets that supported us, and actually, Kurt was able to, make all the finances work, and that was able to allow us to, do an edition with Dark Horse, and I thought that was really great.
Yep.
That got into a lot of venues outside the direct market, and it was really sort of designed to be a book that would appeal to, the non-mainstream superhero reader.
Absolutely.
So it was great that it got some attention in a wider context, and then to have IDW come out with this really deluxe-looking edition was wonderful. So it just keeps sort of resurfacing every 3 or 4 years, and it seems like the people that are discovering it now missed it. In around 2000, and then they probably missed it around 2003, 2004 when the Dark Horse edition came out. So, it's all good. We're really pleased, and actually, Kurt just sent along some proofs for IDW's companion edition of Superstar, which is the book that we did alongside Shock Rockets at that time.
How long did Superstar? How many issues of that did you guys were you able to do?
We did one double-sized issue.
Okay.
Which was, I guess it was 42 or 48 pages. I don't remember precisely, but there were one of the things we did at Guerrilla was were backup stories in the other books by the other creators.
Okay.
So,
yes.
So there were short stories. It was kind of like a flip book situation where, you'd get 22 pages of Section Zero, which was Carl and Tom Grummett's book, and then you'd get 6 or 8 pages of George Perez's book or ours or what have you, and it was a good idea. I think it worked to the extent that it did, but the benefit for us right now is that we get that many more pages that people might not have seen if they just picked up the Superstar standalone book, and they'll get it in this extra edition. And the like Shock Rockets, they're I think there's an essay by Kurt and some sketches and background material and cover designs and other promotional material that we did for different editions, and those books also were translated into a couple of different European languages. So there were extra things that we did for those markets that people might not have seen at all.
Oh, very cool.
That are going to be in the IDW book. Yeah,
that's terrific. Now, honestly, I did miss Superstar. So can you give me the 10-cent tour of the premise?
The main character has a power that allows him to amp up based on donations of life force or, like an energy donation from the general public. So he and his brother, who's his business partner, work together to, set up these kinds of good feelings rallies, and they actually collect these energy donations from the general public in order so that he can, perform his superhero duties.
Okay.
Fighting villains and.
All
right, I've got peanut gallery comments.
What did Kathryn say?
In her way, she just repeated the word duty, and then snickered to herself.
Of course she did. Atta girl.
Yes, of course. She's sweet.
High-minded Kathryn. Thank you. Exactly.
Anyway, yeah,
no, but that makes sense.
I'm sure Kurt is just has his ears burning and his.
I'm kind of bummed, Kurt. I have to tell you, and it's okay, Kurt, if you are listening. But he did a podcast interview with me a few years ago, and he's just decided that he just doesn't like the way he sounds on podcasts, so he's like kind of taking a pass.
Aww.
I know, and I'm like, dude,
well, that's terrible because he's well spoken.
Of course he is.
He's got a lot to say, and I know that he did an interview for the Comics Journal back when it was a paper publication.
Certainly.
And it was huge. I mean, they would do, pay.
Oh, those 30-page
yes,
interviews. Absolutely.
Yeah, they were enormous. And I found out later that it was all done through email, and he would even, type in, square bracket laughter, and, he did his best to actually make it appear as if that it was, it was transliterated, but I was flabbergasted that it wasn't done over the phone or in person. But
yeah, and honestly,
I'm terribly disappointed.
Well, there you go, man.
If I do this, then
there you go. And honestly, I don't say this to like be me. I'm not trying to like out him or anything like that. That in terms of him not wanting to do this, but honestly, we had a wonderful conversation. It's a very downloaded show of mine, and I thought we had a nice rapport and stuff. We talked about it in San Diego, and he was really very pleasant about it and wasn't jerky at all. And I totally respect where he's coming from. Jimmy Chung's another guy like that as well. So I understand.
Yeah.
And Stuart, we know, I know you turned me down initially, but we were able to warm you up, and after Kathryn and I worked you over, here we are talking. So,
Yeah, it only took 2.5 years.
No, but this is good.
I came around. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm going to do it again.
No, I understand. Is it like the dentist? Are you okay? I mean, have I cleaned your teeth? I mean, is it terrible? We've had a nice, lovely conversation.
It's fine. And Kathryn was saying to me earlier today, I was saying, I'm going to put in a whole day's work, and then I got to... and then I'm going to just want to relax, but I've got to be, on and present. And she says, talking to John is just, the easiest thing in the world, and it'll just flow out naturally. And
See?
She's absolutely right.
Oh, my heart melts every time. And honestly, that's very kind.
Yeah,
and
for
I
me, I get duty. for you, it's all hearts and flowers.
Exactly. I'm sorry, man. Exactly. You get the Beavis and Butthead, exactly, of duty. Well, these things happen. That's all right. No, man, and honestly, now we've talked a good long time now, so I will wrap up. But seriously,
okay.
Thank you so much. Honestly, it's been a wonderful conversation.
Oh, thank you.
And
we'll do it again. We'll catch up again when the series is over, and feeling rested and relaxed, and we'll see how it all turns out.
I will find you poolside, and you will be relaxing and enjoying some sort of cocktail and just
I hope so.
And resting on your laurels at that point. No, I have
right now. We've had too much winter, and
oh God, yeah.
That's all I want to think about.
I know. We're like, it's totally frozen tundra to frozen tundra communication right now.
It's all warm thoughts right now.
There you go, my man. Well, good. No, continued success, and truly looking forward to Fear itself. The preview art's been great, and I have full faith in you and Matt. So we're looking forward to being entertained this spring.
Okay, thanks, John.
This next conversation took place at Challengers Comics. Again, Stuart was having a gallery showing of some of his original pages from Fear Itself, his event with Matt Fraction. This was a great opportunity to have a quick conversation with him live and in person. So here's Stuart Immonen live at a comics store in Chicago, Challengers, on this portion of Word Balloon. Oh, this is good. This is Superman's Secret Identity. I'm talking to Stuart Immonen here at his art showing at the Rogues Gallery at Challengers Comics in Chicago. Yes, and it's, first of all, great to see him, man. It's been a year. Very good to see you.
Thanks very much. It's good to see you, too.
And we had a lovely phone conversation earlier this year.
Yes, and we met in San Diego when, well, I guess it was 8, 9, 10 months ago.
We were at a show in Orlando, and that's when Kathryn, Kathryn was, that's when you were shy and you wouldn't talk to him.
Oh.
No, and you were good in public.
Yeah, but she had to sort of ease things along, and once she convinced me that Chicago was okay, that you were okay, then I can make it this far at least.
Excellent. Now, for the purposes of our listeners who already heard this, Kelly Stu says hello.
Oh, hi to Kelly Sue. Hi to all the Fraction Deconics.
No, this is great, man. You got a great showing of your work, and really going back to, as I just said, Superman's Secret Identity, even pages here.
Even further than that, there's stuff from Action Comics, which preceded this Superman work. So this is going back more than 10 years, and it's kind of strange, actually.
Was that the turn of the century story of yours, or
end of the century? No, this is from Action Comics.
Let's take a look.
Action 748.
Yeah. Awesome. There we go. Stuart, it's honestly the different styles that you've done over the years, and we talked about this in our long interview as well. It really is amazing when you see everything kind of together like this in the different styles.
Thanks very much. It's strange. I mean, it's strange for me in that respect, but also it's just seeing so many pieces up, on a gallery wall all together is an odd experience for me, because I'm used to dealing with one page at a time, and thinking about that one thing, and then once I'm done, I put it out of my mind. I never see it again. It goes off to Wade, and then it disappears into the ether as far as I'm concerned. And in fact, when the books are published, I often don't see them until they come in a comp package from Marvel. So that could be 6 months later, and I'm completely divorced from it by then.
Okay, and that's interesting, because I wanted to ask, is it awkward to see this old stuff, or what is the feeling when you see some of the older stuff?
Well, some of the older stuff I don't care for at all, and some of the other stuff I tolerate. But something for me, it could be only a week old, and I won't like it at all. But it's part of the process of doing a monthly series, or a series of monthly series, in my case. Where, not everything is going to work out 100% to your satisfaction every time. And you just have to sort of take the lumps and do your absolute best within the constraints that are available to you, month after month after month.
Yeah. So the horse has to leave the barn, absolutely, no matter what, every 30 days. So,
yeah.
Man.
Oh, I know.
No, hey.
Oh, yeah. There's a little bit of embarrassment, but I think it holds up generally. And, Wade, who I think inked most of this work, is stellar. Jose Marzan did some of the pages. Scott Koblish did a couple. Cool. So it really covers a great range of material, or rather, a range of material which may or may not be great.
Well, I have to say that really Fear itself has been truly tour de force. You taking nothing away from Fraction. Honestly, I think it's if we're going to put names over the title, I got to put your name up first, man, because and truly to service Matt's script, there are so many as we were talking about before we started recording a few hours ago, just these like classic moments that are in this miniseries and really kind of, for lack of a better word, money shots that are just like, pretty awesome things. I mean, God, Bucky with the big gaping hole in his chest.
I know. It's kind of snuck up on me, actually, and you can tell by my voice I'm all choked up about it. But I like Bucky as much as anybody.
Too,
yeah, no, I'm not. I'm taking that very seriously, okay. And it's a serious book. So I'm putting a lot into it. Wade's putting a lot into it. Laura Martin, of course, is doing an amazing job, and everybody's making everybody else look that much better than they already are. So it's a top-notch crew, and I'm really pleased and honored to be part of it.
Well, it's honestly, man, every issue has really been fun to see, and again, all these classic moments. I mean, God, the little throwdown that Odin and Thor had in issue 1.
Yes, so Thor really gets his helmet handed to him a couple of times in this series. There's I guess issue 4 just came out, so you get the teaser with Thor and Hulk and the Thing, which is a matchup that everyone loves.
Oh, man.
In issue 5, we get to see the results, and I'm not going to spoil anything on that, but that was a lot of fun to draw. But Thor really takes it on the chin a lot in this series.
And let's not forget, too, the matchup of the Thing and the Hulk. Excuse me. Yeah, it was the Thing. Or no, excuse me. You know something? Forgive me. Now I'm mixing up my books because I was thinking of maybe in Brian's Avengers where we saw the Red Hulk fight the Thing. Right. So shame on me. That's
no, not at all. I mean, you're probably more versed in the overall storyline than I am, because I'm just concentrating on this one, central but still one part of this, and it's been as long as I've been working on it, which is since 2010. Matt's had that plus 8 or 9 months as well. I mean, when he and I first almost talked about it, as I said in the last podcast, at San Diego, where he said, well, I've got this thing that I'm doing with Marvel, but I can't talk to you about it, so you'll have to talk to Tom. And I said, what? And later on found out exactly what it was about. Matt was working on it from that point all the way through the rest of the year. So, 8 or 9 months, working with editorial, working with other writers, and, really putting heart and soul into mostly what just ended up being that first issue, but obviously working on the whole arc of the 7 issues. So when I got it, it was very fully formed. So, it's just... it's a lot of pressure for me to try and live up to what he had to go through to get that far, and I'm just doing my best.
You're hitting the high notes, man. Honestly, no, it's great, and it was fun to see too. I got the previews for September and saw, I see Steve Rogers with his broken shield, and that there's a nice little image as well.
Yes, I know, and we're doing. It was Matt's idea, I think, to do a series of teaser pages at the end of each issue, so we get to see a little bit of what's coming, and that's always a lot of fun. It's also neat for me to see Steve McNiven do his interpretation of some of these character designs and doing some of the key moments. I mean, I'm a great fan of his, so it's great to have him on covers.
Awesome. And also, about the character design and stuff. I mean, it is this amalgam of what we know about the superhero in addition to give him that Asgardian kind of magic look and everything. I would imagine that we're going to see some sort of toys or statues of some of these designs. I don't know if you know.
No.
Really?
Oh God, I'm so far down the chain that I really have no idea what's going on beyond my four walls.
All right.
That would be great. And, I've got to give props to Marko Djurjevic, who did the great wealth of the designs for the hammer wielders.
Oh, okay.
And you'll see more of his designs in a variety of ways, which, of course, I can't talk about.
An image surfaced, today, and that's
really?
And I think I mentioned that too.
Out of it.
Well, yeah, you've been traveling, so I understand. But it's I want to say the group, and it's silhouetted, so we can figure out some of the outlines of some of this group. But the mighty have at least made a shadowy appearance as we're recording this. And again, I mean, we see a bow wielder with an arrow, so we can kind of surmise that that's Hawkeye. I see a familiar kind of hand gesture with the thumb and pinky finger, and I'm assuming that might be Doctor Strange, Doctor Strange. So,
All right.
I see a certain kind of angle of a web crawler.
Things, huh?
Yeah, there's an armored guy that looks kind of like Tony Stark,
These are all good guesses.
All right, fair enough.
I confirm and deny nothing.
Fair enough, man. I kind of expected that answer. That's all right. Well, seriously, man, nice going. I've really enjoyed the series, and it truly, from issue one, it's been a pleasure to read every page, and continued success. And when we get right before Toronto, after San Diego, and maybe before Fan Expo or whatever, we can maybe find some time and go more in depth with what's going on. And also, I should mention, because do you want to mention what might be coming post Fear, or should we wait till the longer conversation to talk after?
Yeah, let's wait.
Okay, fair enough. Excellent, man.
There's stuff coming.
Oh yeah, and honestly, if you haven't heard it, go back to the spotlight we did in San Diego last year with Kathryn, and we can people can maybe connect the dots, and we'll hear more about some of that stuff. So that's cool. So say hi to Kathryn. I'm really sorry she couldn't make the trip.
Yeah, me too. But she loves it here. I love it here. We'd love to come back. Maybe next con season. That would be great.
Are you literally like hightailing it out tomorrow and flying right back?
Yeah.
Wow.
In the morning. I don't even know if I'll actually even try to go to sleep. It's that early.
If you guys can spend a few days here, we'll hit some more restaurants and stuff, and we'll show you a good time. Of course, yeah. The city's not me and the city. We're not going anywhere, Stuart. But no, it'd be great, man. So seriously, awesome seeing you, and keep it up. Good job.
Okay. Thanks so much, John.
And now to wrap things up, I take you back to San Diego Comic-Con when Stuart and Kathryn were so gracious. I wasn't even planning on going that year to San Diego. It was 2010. Kathryn and Stuart asked me to do their spotlight panel. Jonathan Hickman asked me to do his spotlight panel. And Bendis said, hey, I'm doing a panel. Are you going to be at San Diego? Moderate my panel. So I was like, oh, my God, I have to go. So literally, with about a month's notice, I kind of put together my San Diego plan. Man, I'll tell you, I stayed at the cheapest motel I could find. Thankfully, this was back before everybody started jacking up their prices. At least you could still find a cheap motel that was, a 15-minute cab ride away from the convention center, totally at the opposite direction of where everybody else was staying. But I did it because, it was a great opportunity to moderate all these panels. I'm not going to say no. And truly, one of the highlights was this great panel at San Diego. Now, if you heard the Kathryn Immonen episode already on Word Balloon, then you've heard this, so you can skip to the end if you want to. But for those, like I said, I know sometimes people like to cherry-pick their episodes, and I know Stuart certainly has the higher profile than Kathryn does, so maybe people just listen to this episode rather than the one with Kathryn. Well, you're going to get them both, and it's great. It's very autobiographical because it is a spotlight, so we did kind of cover their early years, and they're wonderful collaborations together. So enjoy this conversation with Kathryn and Stuart Immonen live at San Diego Comic-Con here on Word Balloon. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming to this wonderful panel. My name is John Suntress. I do a podcast called Word Balloon. And it's my pleasure to be here today on this spotlight of Kathryn and Stuart Immonen.
You can clap your words.
So, and please. Oh, that's all right. Not at all. So this is very exciting for me, and we've got a lot to cover. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce someone here from Comic-Con, Mr. Gary Sassaman, who has a great presentation that he would like to
do. Here's Gary.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Stuart. Hi, Kathryn. I'm very honored to have you here as a special guest this year. And my question to you, Stuart, is how long have you been professionally drawing comics?
I think my first paying job was in 1989, and that was for Revolutionary Comics. They were doing a series of unauthorized rock and roll biographies. And I had the pleasure and the notoriety to be on the Guns N' Roses.
The Guns N' Roses.
I'm trying to get them all myself.
I'm here today on behalf of Comic-Con to honor your over 20 years in the industry. So Comic-Con Steve Pot Award for Achievement in Comic Arts.
Yay! Fantastic. Very cool. Look at that. Isn't that cool? Outstanding. That's like
a real pot of ink.
It is a real pot of ink. That's wonderful. That's like when George Carlin, in one of his old 70s concerts, got presented with the Grammy, like at the concert. So this is fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Wow.
So yeah,
we can just do the rest of the hour on this.
Absolutely. Yeah, really. Like a TLC. Yeah, how do you make that statue? That's very impressive, actually. No, you mentioned You mentioned Revolutionary Comics.
Yes.
And yes, Guns N' Roses. What were some of the other bands?
Two Live Crew.
Sweet.
Prince. Motorhead.
The Beatles.
Yes, the Beatles.
Cool.
Reprinted recently.
Now that's got to be worth something on eBay. That's cool.
I couldn't say.
Exactly. They reprinted it recently?
Yeah, I think just last year.
Wow.
So there was a. I mean, normally these issues would be single issues.
Sure, I remember. Yeah.
But they had a year-long 12-issue plan for the Beatles, so it was an ongoing story. There's a lot to tell, and then there were supplementary sort of backup stories that happened at the end of each issue, and I did one of those.
Excellent. Now, when did the two of you get together?
Before Revolutionary Comics.
Yes, because the origin starts before this.
We met about 2 weeks into our first year of university at York University in Toronto, and I went on to graduate. Stuart did not. He lasted about a year, and that was about it. So it's been what that was like. I can't believe it. Every time I talk to John, he makes me say things that I don't want to say.
Oh, I hope that.
And it's going to happen again. So that would have been 1986.
That's okay.
So it's been 24 years.
My God. Well, you wear it well. Both of you wear it well. Isn't that great? Well, and the reason why I asked too is because one of the first things you guys did together was back during that wonderful creative black and white era of the 80s, and there was so many interesting and very singular products coming out, and you guys were a part of that.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, Toronto in particular was one of the hotbeds of the independent black and white movement, and Vortex Comics was based there. Andromeda Publishing was based in Toronto. And they were, Diamond's competition in Canada.
Okay.
But they had international distribution as well. So it was very, very local and very easy for us to approach a publisher like Vortex or do things ourselves, which is what we eventually ended up doing. Chester Brown was doing his Yummy for Mini Comics at that time, and Seth was working on Mr. X for
Bill Martin.
For Vortex.
Team Otter too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So there were all kinds of things going on, loads of other stuff as well. So it seemed very easy and very accessible for someone like me and Kathryn, who had no experience in comics and no experience in distribution or any kind of aspect of the industry, just to go in with both feet. So this was 88. We. Like I said, we just dove in, and we cobbled together this story called Playground, which you can describe if you care to. And we thought we'd do a number of issues of this comic, but in order to help us get distribution and seem more like a real company, we also solicited help from our friends to do an anthology book that would be published alongside.
That's all true. Yeah, but there, Playground was I always hate to describe it because it sounds like the most pretentious product ever, but it was a punk murder mystery, and I'm so sorry.
By
I was 18. It's not my fault.
Come on, it was the time. It was
cool. It was 1989. It's totally not.
It's not like
fault.
it was Acid Wash Jeans issue 1 or something like that. It's okay.
Are you sure? The things that we're not telling you.
All right.
Yeah, but like Stuart said, it seemed possible at the time, and I remember when you left school.
You had to bring that up again.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had no idea what was. I went on to design for film and television for a number of years after I graduated. But when Stuart left, and
I said I wanted to make comics.
Yeah, and I didn't, and that was fine. I didn't have I didn't have a problem with it, but I didn't even know what that meant. It was this completely abstract.
Didn't feel like
thing.
A full-time thing, or
well, I didn't even know how that might happen.
Okay.
Like what that would actually look like, and what that ended up looking like for many years was, you went on to work for every possible small publisher, both extant and extinct now, for very little money, and no residuals and no rights, and that is not meant to sound like a complaint at all, because at the time you had a choice of, there was Caliber and there was Vortex and there was Revolutionary. Stuart did the never released, unauthorized. Excuse me.
Oh,
she's choked up even thinking about it. It's quite all right.
There was a company called Innovation that did Hero Lines and some other things. I guess they had at one point they had the rights to do the comic adaptation of the film.
I don't think they had the rights.
Well, I'll come to that.
We're here. You're here. Don't worry.
The film of Stephen King's Lawnmower Man story, and Jeff Fahey and Pierce Brosnan.
Absolutely, great movie.
So I
great CGI effects and everything. That's got to be an artist's dream.
I never saw it, and I never saw any promotion for it. I had to dig up my own reference on these guys. And this is, of course, pre-internet.
Yes, I was going to say, how do you...
I had to buy 8x10 glossies at a film novelty store.
Wow!
So that was the way it was. And I had the script, and it was, as far as I knew, accurate to the movie, but I had no way of finding him. And I worked for a year on it, and then it turned out that the rights had expired, or they never existed, and they never did publish it.
Are they the ones that sent all the pornography? Do you remember that?
Should I actually assent to that?
Yeah, there was that, right? It was, they sent all this reference material.
In air quotes.
For, I guess, the way they wanted the women models or something. And it was
that was for Hero Line.
Right, and it was this huge packet of pornography, and so we had to call them and say, please don't do that, because we are not coming to work.
There are customs laws against that.
That's a good point. Yes, international law, absolutely.
And that was also at a time when there had been a number of big sting operations in Toronto. Omaha Cat Dancer was one of the big ones, and there were lawsuits, and also Little Sisters, the lesbian bookstore, was also embroiled with American customs at that time for similar materials. So it just, what a nightmare. Oh my God.
Well, beyond the stuff that you guys did together, black and white, Kathryn, when did your other comic writing? Is it really like within the last few years? Or?
No, not really.
Yeah,
it's sort of been ongoing for the last. Well, since we've known each other, you wanted to make comics of your own at the same time that you were doing this work, and wanted me to write something for you. My degree is in theater design. It's a heavily text-based discipline. Writing was always sort of an interest, so I said, okay. And we did this thing together, and the Caliber Press picked up Playground.
Okay.
Right, and did one more issue on top of the ones that we self-published. So in between then and now, there's just been a lot of small projects that have been slotted in between just the other work that I was doing. which has just sort of been one thing that follows on. I mean, it's all the jobs up till now for me, regardless of the medium, it's freelance work, right? So it's not anything that you ever apply for or get a job in a conventional way. It's just one project leads to another, leads to another. So, you know, I had done some Captain America work for Marvel, and also Mutant X when it was the TV show, and they released some books. And so there were those two things, and those were a couple of years apart. And then the Hellcat, Marvel Comics Presents was relaunched, and so we did the Hellcat thing, which led to the Hellcat miniseries, which led to the, so that's just, you know, that's what I don't mean to sound ungrateful. I am, you know, thrilled, and I love Marvel, and they are, you know, it's just, they're terrific gang to work for. But it's just been sort of a rolling stone, and so, you know, I'll do it as long as they keep asking.
Well, and, you know, we just wrapped up Heralds.
That's right.
And that was a wonderful miniseries, and I really enjoyed it, you know, kind of covered that. I always hate the whole glass ceiling and women in comics, because you bring it, and it seems that every editor and publisher that I know, gender isn't an issue. At least it's been my experience on the outside. And as long as you bring the writing or drawing, they want you. And your depth of characterization in everything you do, whether it is the 5 issues of Heralds or even that wonderful story in the 80-page Superman giant of Lois and Clark. Did you guys see that? Because it really is. A lot of times, like you say, you get these freelance things, and they are little stories in an anthology or something. And I wasn't expecting it, and it absolutely knocked me out. It was so wonderful. It was Lois has like the flu. And it's this wonderful Lois and Clark story where Clark is doing everything he can to be a good guy and a husband. And I almost wonder if there was a dynamic there playing out in some way.
Well, Superman's not, I mean, you can talk about the big guy.
Yes, because of Stuart's history with Superman as well.
But I don't find him the most, most superheroes, for me anyways, the strength of those characters is not the superheroics, right? So the strength of Patsy Walker Hellcat is not Hellcat, it's Patsy Walker.
Certainly.
And I think part of the problem with Superman, for me, is because those two things, the Clark Kent and the Superman, they're awfully close together, now, especially.
Sure.
But also, he's invincible, and he's kind of boring, and, he's not my favorite. So, except that he was my favorite in the serials, the old serials, when he was kind of a jerk, had like a really short attention span, he was mischievous, a bit of a child. I loved that iteration of Clark Kent for sure. So that's what, in that story, Lois and Clark have separate beds, which was just sort of, and I know that some people looked at it and went, that's not the way he is. Just for now, it's a proposition. It's just, let's just think about them like this for 8 pages. It won't kill you, and let's just see what happens, right?
Well, I remember when I was drawing Superman and Carl Kiesel was writing. It was always Carl's idea that Clark and Lois were like Nick and Nora Charles, so that they would be exchanging witty banter, and they'd be there'd be double entendres, and they'd be very sly together. Nick and Nora would have the dream,
right?
All the time. And I agree with you. I think that the strength of the characters has everything not to do with the action sequences. They're what propels the story, and they get you from beginning to end. But what the meat of it inevitably is how these people interact with each other, what they mean to each other.
And then a very different dynamic as far as man and woman is played out in moving pictures, the Top Shelf book, but also the wonderful webcomic that they did. And Stuart, I should ask because, and I can appreciate from it being the web project that it was, that your style of art obviously was simpler and very interesting compared to your, work for DC and Marvel.
That other stuff that pays the bill.
No, but this and Hergé kind of Tintin kind of feel to it.
For sure. It was a bit of a challenge to try and pick a style that I could come back to intermittently while working on superhero.
How do you find the time to do that exactly?
Well, it's not just a matter of time, but consistency, because if I'm drawing one way, 5 or 6 days of the week, and then this is my sort of weekend project, which in a superhero style would not be appropriate for the story. How do I pick something that I can do once a week and get up to speed on immediately, and then get it online and get it posted, and then pick the next thing, the next page for the next section. So there were a number of iterations of what it was going to look like. As I showed
really
the slideshow, good for audio.
Please.
Good for radio.
No, that's okay. You got to serve both audiences. It's quite all right. Are they?
There were. I not only did a number of sketches to figure out what the characters would look like, their body types and their clothing styles and settings and so on, but
and that's closer to kind of the Nextwavy kind of look and everything a bit.
Yeah, this was more naturalistic, and it was more sort of halfway between where it ended up and what I was doing on mainstream books. But even this, I thought, might be more time-consuming than it should be, just because we did have a schedule. If we were going to get it done once, one page every week, then it would still take almost 3 years to do.
Sure.
So there was a consistency aspect, but there was also time. And, when we're publishing it online, then there's an expectation. It is a publishing schedule, right? So there are people that are waiting at the other end of it for that page to appear.
And it was the same day every week, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way to really achieve success with a webcomic is to be there on time every week. Absolutely.
Yes. And we find that, to really be successful online, it's got to be more frequent than that. But this was the amount of time that we had to spare for this and still get it done. So I really had to pare things down, and in a matter of synchronicity, it really did suit the story much better to have a very stripped down style with no ambiguity to it whatsoever. Well, I've got some other examples. I'll scroll through here if you. But I also wanted to show the scripts. The original script was not done in a conventional comic way.
Okay.
Where there are page breakdowns and panel descriptions, what happens in each key moment. So this was done more as a play or a movie script, screenplay. So we spent a lot of time. The collaboration time that we spent was not in the me looking over the Kathryn as she typed the script or her checking on the art, but in the middle where we decided where the key moments should be and how much should be said in each panel. So you can see that these are heavily notated.
They look like, for my audio audience, it's like kind of diagrams and sheets. It's almost like John Madden taking a pen out and showing you exactly how the play just unfolded on a football play.
And a big coffee stain.
Well, that's good. That's the domestic collaboration. I think that's good.
At one point, in a matter of consistency, I felt that I was getting off base with drawing one of the main characters, Olive Gardner. I thought she started to look like the man with the yellow hat from The Curious George. So Kathryn here is making fun of me. But you can see in the top line of this script where there are a bunch of numbers and lines and breakdowns. But we decided that this one sentence is actually it looks like one page, a whole page of description. So that's fairly unconventional. But this is the kind of thing that we did throughout the 3-year process. Here are some examples of stylistic changes. The top one was the second last version that I attempted. It's very close to the bottom tier, which is the final look of the strip. But even that I felt was too naturalistic and too soft and didn't really match well with the story. Examples, pencils and finished inks. And this is the way it looked like online on our website.
Mm-hmm. But it changed quite a lot too. And when we first started talking to a couple of different publishers to see if anyone would even be interested in having this go to print, our main reason for wanting to do that was because we've published and distributed books ourselves, and it's a lot of work.
Sure.
And I didn't want to have to build one more goddamn cardboard box. Like I really didn't. So we were trying to Top Shelf, and so that was really our that was the impulse. We just wanted someone to take the grunt work off of our hands. And the only reason I'm telling you the story is because it just points out what complete idiots we are. Because the editorial process that we went through with Chris Staros at Top Shelf was incredible, and he made it a better book. So it's not substantially different than what was online, but it's refined and cared for in some different ways. And it was great to talk to someone who, when it takes you 3 years to do something and you're really only doing a page a week, you kind of you follow the small threads, but it can be very difficult to have sort of the big picture in mind. So to give it to him, who had never really seen this thing before, the input that he came back to us, with which he came back to us, was extraordinary, and it made it a much, much better book. So that's the reason you go to Top Shelf.
Have you guys, show of hands, people, have you read Moving Pictures? It's outstanding for those who haven't, and truly seek it out at the Condas Top. I'm assuming Top Shelf has a booth.
Yeah.
So really go downstairs. And do you guys have signings there this weekend?
We do.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And it's a bargain too. It's $14.95. Come on. And and the wonderful thing about Chris is, before he was publishing Top Shelf, he did the Staros report pre-internet, and it was such an invaluable newsletter for comic fans to find interesting projects. So it doesn't surprise me that this is the kind of book that he would love. So by all means, check it out. It's a wonderful story. The backdrop is World War II and the contraband art that the Nazis were taking it, but that's just the backdrop, and it's a wonderful story, and I love the juxtaposition of the fine art and your recreations of the fine art while the storyline's going through, and that's just to even choose the art to kind of have that subtext of what's going on. Just really, it's such an interesting thing.
You can draw, right?
Well, and you can write. I mean, honestly, that's the thing. It truly, you always defer, but I got to tell you, honestly, you're both.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I know, and Stuart, I want to take them on. And by the way, folks, if you have questions, we do want to have time for that. So please, if you want to prepare, I guess there's not a microphone set up, but if you don't mind doing a line, just so we can kind of gauge, questions and stuff like that. So if you're leaner than
do you want to talk about Russian Olive first? And
I should just go through. So we're working on something new right now, so it'll be ready, I guess, 2035.
Will this be through Top Shelf as well, or
this has no home yet.
Okay.
That's certainly possible.
Okay, and Russian Olive to Red King.
To Red King. So it's another tortured love story. I've heard from a couple of people who say that they're used to the funny from me, but I would say that this stuff, which is Moving Pictures, is best described as one long strangled inhalation. There's I'm really selling this hard, right?
No, but there's a wonderful tension and dynamic between this woman and this officer and an interrogation that's going on. And
then you find out what's really going on between the pair of them. But it's really, maybe you can talk about this a little bit. To try and do a story where, action in this context means that maybe somebody, gets up. Or if they're feeling really crazy, they'll take off a jacket. It's just this intense clench over 140 pages. That's almost unbearable. That was the whole sort of intention.
I would love to see, and don't get me wrong, this is a wonderful book, and Stuart Start's lovely, but I could see this easily being a two-person play. And I think it would play so well. And it reminded me of so many other tense, and forgive me, but it's a Comic-Con audience. That wonderful interrogation episode of Babylon 5 and this power struggle between these two characters that also is part of this very strained relationship that's going on in the story. And I don't want to tip it, but it's really great. And there's it's great. There's just a lot. There's a lot going on here, and it's such a wonderful, really dense read in a good way that you'll really sink into it like a good novel, and a good graphic novel in this case, clearly.
But I think what you were hinting at was that it's so still. I mean, there's a lot going on in terms of the character interplay and in terms of the backstory and the layers that are being revealed as you go through. And usually we've heard from people that they get more out of it on the second read, which is gratifying.
Absolutely.
But for me, there's so many still moments in the book that when an actual action has to take place, it was a bit of a challenge for me to figure out a way to draw it that wouldn't seem out of place. So we can't have, Jack Kirby, smashing through the fourth wall and
big punches. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's one scene where the interrogator loses his cool and picks up a drinking glass full of water and smashes it on the table. And it seems like such a simple thing to describe, and yet it took me, I think, almost all week to try and figure out this sequence. I think normally in comics that would be one panel, but I ended up sort of drawing around the action because I couldn't bring myself to draw this thing actually happening, emotion lines, none of that. I couldn't do it. So I actually had to draw the few moments before, the hand in the air, still the rock, and then glass shattering as if it had happened just a few minutes before that. So it ended up taking a whole page, this one thing that in any other conventional comic would have just been a panel.
What do you want to tell us, and what can you tell us about the new story as it's coming out? Will you be presenting it first online again, or is this going to be a similar kind of project?
Well, that's the thing. One of the things that happened as far as my contribution to moving pictures went is that, as I described, I did one panel a week, and then I was doing other stuff. So when it was presented online, I don't think anybody minded too much if there were inconsistencies in the art. But once we had the idea that it was becoming concrete that it was going to be in book form and all these pages were going to be in close contact with each other, I began to really nitpick and look very carefully at the way the art looked from the beginning to the end. It was all done, of course, sequentially because it was done, piecemeal.
Sure.
One page every week for 140 weeks.
Wow.
So that's normal.
No, hey.
So I went through the whole book and I made changes almost on every page to make the beginning look more like the end and make the end look more like the beginning. Because as I sort of got to know the characters and got to know what the contours are to follow when I'm drawing them, it became sort of like shorthand, and I was finding it much easier at the end, and it looked sort of less constructed than it did at the beginning, so I tried to soften up the beginning to make it look like it was a little less, like it was more effortless, and at the end I tried to give it a little more structure like it had at the beginning. So this one, in comparison, is just going to be pencils only for the entire creative process. Okay. And to avoid the problems that I had with the consistency of moving pictures at the end, I'm just going to ink everything on Russian olive at once, and hopefully it'll knit itself together in a way that the moving picture wasn't able to.
Very cool. And story-wise?
It's another love story that takes place along two parallel timelines. Red King, it's in an urban setting. He's trying to finish a project that's not going well. He's avoiding phone calls, and he doesn't really speak to anyone but he talks to the dog. And all this at the same time that this is happening, his girlfriend, Russian Olive, has been in a plane crash in the northern bush. So he's trying to get this work done, all the while not knowing what's happened to her, and then it's her journey parallel to his at the same time. And the big sort of issue that really starts to come up is the question of whether or not she in fact did survive the plane crash becomes increasingly unclear.
Very cool.
So it's about Chekhov's tunnels that he was trying to dig to the northern island of Japan, and it's about petroglyphs, and it's about not being able to write, and it's about just not knowing what's happened to someone who's terribly important in your life, and so it's a barn burner.
Outstanding.
It's so I think it's going to be good.
When do you think you'll be debuting it?
Soon.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not your editor. I'm not your editor. Don't worry.
I will commit to 2035. And if it comes earlier, we're like Apple when we're ready.
When it's ready to hit the atmosphere, I expect a call, and we will go in depth.
Well, we certainly, with Moving Pictures, wanted to self-impose a deadline so that it would get done, because Kathryn had finished the script a number of years before I got up the speed to even begin drawing. And I always said, when I finish this project, I'll dive into it, or I'll do it in between things. And it never really happened. So once a number of people we knew were starting to do things online, it seemed like a really convenient way, if not easy, to make ourselves force ourselves to find the time to do at least a page a week. But as I say, it still took 140 weeks. Which seems impossible at the beginning, and it seems like it will still never end once you're 120 weeks into it. But that had a lot of things going for it. But as I say, I was unhappy with the overall consistency. So we're trying to stay on schedule with this, even though it doesn't have that sort of audience built into it, where people are. It may just be a dozen people, or it may be 100 or 1,000 who are looking online every Friday or whatever to see the thing. But I think I've learned enough things to be able to stick on schedule, with my Marvel stuff, and still be able to maintain a schedule for this. It shouldn't take more than a couple of years.
No worries. All right. Well, I'm sure you all have questions, and I'd like to get questions started, so please.
John, it's great to see you after many hours listening to you.
You're very kind, sir. Thank you.
And definitely going to check Moving Pictures, but on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, I was wondering what are the plans for Nextwave?
There we go.
What are the plans for Nextwave? Well, I'll say that this weekend is the closest I've ever been to Warren Ellis in person. And I haven't met him yet. So Warren, I, and our editor are all here. And I don't know if they've talked about it, but I and the editor have talked about it. And when the 12-issue hardcover collection came out last year, there was some talk about whether we could do a framing story or some kind of sequence that we could package with that. And Warren resisted it at first. So I hear, never having spoken to him, but then came up with something that he wanted to do, and I said I was on board, and nothing ever came of it. So marketing didn't support it. Everybody who was involved with the book would die to go back onto it, but so far the budgetary concerns have not worked themselves out, and it's all having to do with numbers at this point.
It's that problem that seems to be unique to Marvel, where they've just got a number in mind. I don't know the number, and I'm sure it's well kept, but yeah, it's because it is. There are these wonderful, quirky things, and Nextwave was such an attention getter of all these C-list characters, and it was clearly the creative process that made it the important book that it was. But, then it's time to make the donuts, and obviously look at what Warren is writing, look what Stuart is drawing, look at the numbers they get on each of those projects, and you would certainly hope that there would still be time in the schedule for these kind of things to happen. We all want it.
Well, I remember
as a fan, we all want it, clearly.
Basically, someone claimed that basically they couldn't afford to keep you on it because...
This was Warren, and the other half of that was that he said in the same paragraph that he'd happily work for a bottle of scotch. So whatever. It sounds good, but it's not true.
Maybe we need to.
It's everybody put together, and if sales do not support a book, it gets shelved. So there's nothing unique about that structure. It's just the way things are. So, I've got to be on books that can support that.
But the other good thing I would say, too, with anticipation, I mean, look how long we waited for Perez to do the JLA Avengers book, and then when it happened, no pressure, Stuart. But, really these things become kind of...
JLA Avengers, Nextwave.
No, but they do. They become these kind of hotly anticipated, we want to see a new one, and maybe that kind of momentum will eventually make this happen.
That's a beautiful theory.
Let's hope so. Sir.
Hello.
I was wondering with moving pictures, how much research you did and what kind of research, and how much you felt like you could rely on what people already know about World War II.
I'll start. I read a lot. The thing that started it was reading Janet Flanner's Paris correspondence when she was the Paris correspondent during the war years for New Yorker.
New York Courier?
New Yorker magazine.
Oh, the New Yorker. Excuse me. Of course.
So that was really great, just great reading. And then there was like this little moment that when she talked about them cleaning the Louvre, that just was interesting. It's there's tons of material available. You can read until you die. But we did a really great panel about this exact thing in Toronto at TCAF, where we were talking about history and research. And one thing that we all sort of agreed on was the moment that you have to stop the research or stop using the research is when you find yourself wanting to include things that your parents, your characters, oh my God.
Wow.
There's so much.
There's a couch outside. We can set up a session later. Don't worry.
That's hilarious. There's so much I include that my parents just don't care about. But in this case, the things that your characters don't care about, just because you think it's really cool or really interesting, your characters don't have that kind of panoptic view that you do as the creator of the work. So I think you read and reread and you look and look, and the landscape for that period of time is so rich and richly trod, and at no point did either of us think that we had anything to contribute to anybody's understanding of what happened at that moment. But we had, we felt we had these characters to contribute in whatever context that was, and we just picked this one as a backdrop to sort of try and talk about a particular kind of relationship.
I'll ask quickly, though, Stuart, the New Avengers, new volume, I mean,
yes.
What? Any specific choices? I mean, obviously this is a great story, and I look forward to your interpretation of how magic is changing in the Marvel Universe. That's how Bendis has described it to me.
That is definitely the way he was describing it to me, too. I mean, this was his impetus for bringing these particular characters together and starting off the storyline the way he has. I'm working in close collaboration with Wade von Gravasher, who's inking, and Laura Martin, who's coloring. And we bounced a bunch of ideas off Brian and the editor to try and keep things consistent within the context of the Marvel Universe as it exists. And Brian wants to have some nods to very early representations of magic, i.e., Ditko,
sure,
even pre-64 stuff. So. We're trying to include elements like that, and I'm just trying to draw the best that I can.
Well, it's
otherwise,
it's coming through, and I love the bits of magic business we saw in this week's issue.
That's right. I haven't seen the printed version.
I rushed because I knew it was coming out this week, and I knew I'd be seeing both of you. So I'm like, all right, I got to be ready. And it's fantastic.
It's probably fresher in your mind than it is.
It's great, and it's wonderful seeing you drawing these characters that are part of the new team. It's great to see the Thing on the team. Hellstorm and Doctor Strange. I'm always happy to see.
Yeah, what's great about Brian is that he'll see something that I'll have done in an offhand way and say, I really want to get all over that again. So the Thing is on the team because Brian was really jazzed about the way that I was drawing that character and
fantastic
other context.
Absolutely.
So, Doctor Strange, everybody was all over, how I was doing the mustache. So,
Kathryn got
an ongoing character in the book.
And Kathryn got to play with the FF and Heralds, and that book is fantastic. When does the trade come out, or hardcover? Because I know literally the
I don't know. They seem to follow really quickly on the heels.
Okay, because
soon, I guess.
If you hadn't picked up the weekly issues, it's a great story. It is an event in its own way, and it's a wonderful group of characters. And you get to revisit Patsy, but it's this wonderful story involving the new Nova and the creation of the character now. And like I said, the FF is in there, Photon is in there. I call her Photon. Emma Frost and Cyclops are in there, and She-Hulk, and it's great. It's really, and it keeps moving, and it's this really big event. It's really great. Ma'am, I'm sorry, please.
Kathryn, about the Hellcat Mini.
Yeah.
I was really impressed by your version of native culture and having Alaska that was so.
Thank
you. Very cool.
So, where did you get the inspiration for all that?
That's what a great question. Patsy. The thing about Hellcat is that she doesn't actually have any superpowers. Not really. I mean, there was a little bit of sort of psychic training that she did with Moon Dragon. I guess it didn't take. So it's a big problem with her. But because she's sort of, been dead, been to hell and back, has this relationship with Damon Hellstrom, there's like this sort of magic-based component to what she does. I'm not really sure what it has to do with her exactly, but it's always kind of been present in the stories since she has been both avenging and defending. So I needed to look for a place where she could go where magic would be present. So that was it. So I just sort of started to look at, where are places where shamanic magic or whatever is still kind of extant or is a present concern or is having an influence in a day-to-day way that in a lot of ways is not very magical at all. It's just sort of folded into a kind of worldview. So, and because it was associated with the initiative, we had to, so I guess that was not going to be, Minneapolis, St. Paul, probably. So Alaska seemed ripe for the picking, and I love the population to geography, people per acre ratio was very good. And it just seemed like the most ridiculous idea that they thought that it would be okay to just send her and somehow that would be sufficient. And I guess it was. So, but that's what it was. It was trying to find something where there was a magic base that, could be traded on, for sure.
And Patsy seems to be that constant thread through a lot of your recent Marvel work because even in and that's awesome. Well, I know, and we discussed it in our first Word Balloon interview. It was wonderful to see her too in the Shamrock story, and again, wonderful cameo, or not cameos, because they really were all players in the story in Girl Comics issue 2. I thought that was really terrific to see. And again, you pack so much character in like 11 pages.
Yeah, it wasn't very much.
Yeah,
Shamrock too.
Yeah, exactly. And she's like, hey, you're getting Shamrock.
Oh, listen, I got the call to do that, and they said, it can be any character you want, but we'd really like it to be Shamrock. And I had no idea who that was. And then she described it to me. I'm like, really? She's like a hairdresser?
But
really?
well, right now, I would say you have the definitive Shamrock story. It's great, though. It truly is great. It's a great, empowering story, and it's not what it needs to be on the surface, but it manages to have good action and wonderful characterization of a good number of Marvel women. It's great. And Colleen Coover drew it.
Yeah, it was
and Lauren Sankovic was the editor on Girl Comics and stuff. It's fantastic, and these are one of the good stories. Did you have one more question, sir? We're near the end, so if there is anybody else for a quick question after this gentleman.
Kathryn, I was just wondering, do you have any information you can share about the state of Runaways?
Indeed.
I wish I did. I don't. Anything that I have to say about the Runaways is just sort of my general feeling about where this is at. It's not based on any. I'm just gonna caveat until we're done, right? It's not based on any actual information. When I took over Runaways, it was the last 4 issues that were already on the schedule. I did the best that I could to sort of make it as irresistible as possible for them to keep on with that book. I failed. I'm sorry.
Well, not from a creative standpoint, I would say, clearly.
But it didn't happen, and my expectation was not that we were going to be able to pull that off because it was already on the bubble.
Sarah Pichelli drawing, correct?
Sarah Pichelli, yeah.
Pichelli, okay.
Yeah. Oh, get it right.
And I know, shame on me. Look, when they did the covers, exactly.
So that was great. we're hoping, that there's been rumblings about the movie forever and a day.
I would think with Marvel TV as well that that's got to be.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
That's got to be. And I mean, I've talked to Loeb, and of course he won't commit to anything. I know announcements are going to be made. I don't think any live action announcements, but come on, that thing's made for TV. Give me a break.
I hope the movie does go ahead, and I hope that that's sort of the thing that will get those characters back on the schedule. I think Marvel. I think they're having. They're just trying to figure out what those characters mean to them and where they sort of fit within, the Marvel universe. My preference, of course, would be that they don't fit at all within the Marvel universe. But that's a strength of the characters, but that's not a strength for the book. So, hopefully they'll work it out. But I'm hoping.
Something, anything in the, as again, because of the life of a freelancer, anything in the immediate future? You just wrapped up Herald's and the Girl Comics issue?
Yeah, there are 3 things right
Still
now,
not being announced yet?
None of it's announced.
Okay, no worries. But it's in the pipeline.
There is Hellcat. But it's a one-shot.
Oh, when is this?
I can't tell you.
Okay. You'd have to kill me.
So irritating.
No worries. Yay, though. More Hellcat. Fantastic.
More Hellcat, yeah.
Outstanding.
Yeah, with possibly the most perfect co-star for her ever.
There's going to be a great Hellcat collection coming shortly because of this body of work that you're creating for us, so that's wonderful.
I'm single-handedly trying to get her to take over everything.
We'll
see how that goes.
Always a pleasure seeing it back. And Stuart, of course, on New Avengers.
That's right. Yeah, New Avengers and Russian Olive are just about all I can juggle at this point.
Understood. That's great. Well, continued success, guys, because it's always a pleasure to read and observe the art, and it's always great. Really, go to the Top Shelf booth, pick up Moving Pictures. It's a wonderful collection, and they are the sweetest people, and they've always been incredibly kind to me. And I'm so happy to finally have the opportunity to have Stuart on tape, and hopefully this will have broken the ice, and he'll come on the phone and we can talk even more. We didn't talk about Spider-Man. We barely talked about the DC stuff, and you're always a pleasure, and thank you so much.
John.
And thank you for asking me to moderate. And Stuart, thank you for putting me in Ultimate Spider-Man as principal centrist, which was ridiculously nice. So thank you, and thank you for coming today. My pleasure.
There you go. I'm still surprised that they made this announcement, but then kind of knowing them on an acquaintance level, I suppose it doesn't surprise me. These are very interesting people, and I think have a lot of varied interests. So if they're able to take the time and step away from comics for a while, do some other projects, more power to them. 2 incredibly creative and very sweet people of the comics industry, Kathryn and Stuart Immonen. I hope you enjoyed today's look at Stuart's career here on Word Balloon today. It was all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support through Patreon. If you want to help the cause and subscribe to Word Balloon, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or click on the ad on the front page of wordballoon.com. Word Balloon is also brought to you by InStock Trades at InStockTrades.com. There is a ton of Stuart Immonen product that is on sale for you at InStockTrades.com. You can get things like the New Avengers Trade Paperback Volume 12, Powerless, Bendis doing the writing, Stuart doing the art, 42% off, $9.27. There's Shock Rockets, him and Kurt Busiek, 60 years in the future, a wonderful hardcover, and this is 30% off, $17.49. There's New Avengers Siege, one of the great events of Brent Bendis' New Avengers run, featuring art from Stuart Immonen. This is 60% off, $9.99. You can get Superstar, Volume 1, as seen on TV. This again was Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen. 30% off. It's just $10.49. Stuart also did an incredible run on Thor with Dan Jurgens. Lost Lord of Asgard trade paperback. This is 42% off, $11.59. There's Ultimate Fantastic Four, Volume 8, Devils, featuring Mike Carey's writing and Stuart Immonen's art. It is 42% off, just $7.53. There's Ultimate Spider-Man, of course. Ultimatum. Who can forget the Ultimatum event, the Great Flood that happened? This is, of course, Bendis, David LaFuente, and Stuart Immonen. It's 42% off for the trade paperback, $11.59. And there's Ultimate X-Men, Volume 12, Hard Lessons, Brian K. Vaughan and Stuart Immonen. 42% off, $7.53. Just tons of great Stuart Immonen work waiting for you at InStockTrades.com. Don't take my word for it. Go there yourself. You'll find great books at great prices. Don't forget, if your orders are $50 or more, you'll receive free shipping from InStockTrades.com. Thanks again for listening to Word Balloon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners, for your support. A great June is going to be starting on Friday with a great new conversation. Dan Brereton is going to be talking about the fact that Thrill Killer is coming back out into print. His wonderful DC Elseworlds run with Howard Chaykin doing the writing. A great look at Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon together like you've never seen them before, from a very swinging 60s kind of Viva Las Vegas attitude. We also talk about the Nocturnals, because there's a new Art of the Nocturnals collection that is coming out. Plus other just great conversations. I love talking to Dan. He is one of the original Word Balloon guests that really helped put Word Balloon on the map. And again, great opportunity to talk to one of our old friends from Word Balloon. So Dan Brereton on the next Word Balloon. I hope you join me. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2018.